I'm really excited for the next activity. We're going to have a panel discussion, and we have a special guest moderating today, which is Estelle Clark. Estelle is a Yorta Yorta Wemba Wemba trans woman. She was born in Burlu on Nongun. Oh, I should have continued to check this language. I didn't read the second sentence. Wajak, but has resided in Gadigal country since 2015. She currently works at Black Aboriginal Corporation as the Programs and Training Coordinator based at the National Centre of Indigenous Excellence in Redfern. Please welcome Estelle. Could I also invite the panel members to come onto the stage, and Estelle will introduce them.
Hi everyone, it's this fun. I really hate microphones. I don't think I ever feel more dysphoric than when I hear my voice back. I hope you're all very well, and I'm really thankful that I have such a beautiful panel of people speaking to their experience in the alcohol and other drugs sector and service space. Before I start today, I want to acknowledge that we're on Gadigal country. I want to acknowledge elders past, present, as well as young people in these spaces moving into positions of power and leadership. I would like to acknowledge Sister Girls, Brother Boys and Trans Mob for their constant resilience in this space and extend that to any in the room today. Oh, sorry, this is like the first time I've done something in person. I don't know if everyone else is the same. It's like, this is so different. I can't just turn off my camera if I'm not feeling nice because we're in person. We all do it. Earlier today as well, you would have had Jack explain some cultural terms to you as well, like sister girl and brother boy. And I want to kind of reinforce that while these are terms that we use in community and through several communities that we have on this continent, they're not pan identities that we place on all people who are trans or First Nations. Specifically in the lead up to World Pride, you might be seeing sister girl and brother boy used quite consistently. And I encourage you to make sure that if you use language like that, that you affirm with the person first that that's language that they're comfortable with. Some other identities that we kind of talk to are trans women, like myself. We talk to women with trans experience, Black women with trans experiences. And I think that that's a more healthier way to kind of talk to that rather than just assuming that if you come across a Black fellow who's trans, they're immediately a sister girl or a brother boy. I want to introduce the panel today. We have Rusty Nana, Roxy Tickle, and Naif. Jamie, I feel like I remembered it. Martin is like, yes, you got it sorted. And today we're going to be speaking. I have some questions to kind of talk to our experiences working within and accessing these spaces. I'm going to pass it over to you guys to introduce yourself. I'll start with you, Naif, to tell us a little bit about you and your experience in this space.
Hello. I personally love microphones, so that's my lived experience. My name's Dave Jamie. I use she or they pronouns, which I learned earlier for rolling pronouns. I didn't know that. And I'm a trans person. Yeah, so I guess my pronouns for me are, I explain them in the way like my she is my core essence of who I am. It's my femininity, my power. And my they is my political. That's my commitment to decolonization and moving past a binary gendered world. So they both have relevance and they both are important parts of me. I don't have a preferred one. They're just things. They move, they change. I am a Wiradjuri woman. My great-grandfather grew up near so-called Wellington, breaking horses. Yeah, that's where I get all my coolness and strength from. What else? I am a LGBTQI+ peer support worker at St. Vincent's, and I use my living experience to advocate for my communities and yeah, sort of tangibly role model a way through the intersections of queerness, transness, mental health and substance use, because I played all those games That's me.
Hi, my name is Roxy Tickle. I work for the Buttery in northern New South Wales, Bundjalung Nation. I am still getting used to microphones. They're very uncomfortable for me, but I've made a decision to help trying to explain what it means to be trans or gender diverse to people, so I'll kind of have to get used to them. I'm not from a counselling background. I work in the finance department at the Buttery. The working in the AOD field has been really helpful for me in that I learned a lot about myself and some issues that I've had in the past. We'll talk about them a little bit later. That will do.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Rusty Dunner, born and bred in the central west of Western Australia. My background is on the semi-arid eastern desert peoples. My bloodline goes right across to the heart of Australia. On my father's side, I'm a Noongar. They're all from down the southwest. Now this trans adventure, this is going to be a little bit of a strange one for me, because when I was young, I grew up alone. There was no such thing. So basically all my life I grew up around, and my thinking to this day has always been around how heterosexual people would live through life and deal with life and all the humps and bumps that comes with it. The trans thing was never something that my life knew about or heard about, although I knew that I was somebody that was different. And being Yamini meant that I was protected by a big old tribe. So if anybody ever raised their hand or their voice to me, they'd have one of my aunties put me on your ass. And that goes with my aunties on my father's side. So I was protected in a lot of ways. I grew up with a lot of my family members. So for me to be who I am was never anything for them, because they knew this was we were kids. Some of the boys now, I'll tell you this one, little bit, just a bit of a laugh. Some of these guys I used to go skinny dipping with, was to jump the back pool at the pool fence in this little one-horse town back in West Aussie. Now these men are actually your grandfathers and great-grandfathers. And yet when we sit together, we'll always have a laugh about when we all jump the fence in the middle of the night, and when that moon baking, we used to call it, you know, that was some of the things that I used to get up to with the brothers and with the girls. Now, we had some shenanigans together. So there's many green apple, we used to call them, soldiers, used to roll through town. So me and my partners in crime would clean them up. We had ourselves some fun. But when all said and done, being over there was something that people take it for granted nowadays. And it's very sad, but you know, you've got to remember too that there's a hell of a lot of isolation out there even today. So you just can imagine what it was for me like maybe over 45 years ago. The one road in and the one road out. So you learned how to survive and how you get away, and how you learn how life is not exactly how it's all bed, you know, hunky-dory in a race, better roses. Coming to Sydney back in the 80s, being black for starters, I was always judging my skin colour, then my surname, which is Nana, which is a word that's been spoken on this island since the beginning of time, I'm proud to say. Coming here, and then, you know, I did the King's Cross thing, we did the hooking, we did the partying, and then back then in the 80s, I used to be a top little typist. So I was able to get temp work back in the CBD back in those days, because good typists before computers came along, peoples. And those things were the size of a fridge. 2 colours, orange and green, you remember those colours? Only just a couple of young girls anyway. But so, you know, for me as a black trans woman, or black woman with a trans experience, let me get that right. Getting work, and then having the gall to push myself further and to apply for jobs in this massive, great big company. And I had to go for the interview out to Parramatta Point. It was the very first time that I had to slip into out of drag because I used to dress out androgynous. And that was the very first time I transitioned on the workplace back in the 80s. There was nothing for us. I worked for a massive health insurance commission, and being a trans and having a look at all what was available in payments back for people who had procedures done, came to the trans section. It was just there marked and there was nothing. So that was the world that I threw myself into. But then mental health issues, you didn't have all that kind of stuff. But if you hadn't worked on here, that's nothing. I went from that to that. And then I became a service provider of all those that were support persons for me. And that was when I was in the road of recovery. Now that was an interesting experience as well, but I'll leave it for another time.
I'm actually going to come straight back to you, Rusty, on the end of that. I'm so sorry. Why is it important that AOD services are educated about and inclusive of women with trans experience, Black women with trans experience, and sister girls? And just hold the mic a little bit closer so everyone can hear you.
Now, I'm going to tell you this about my experience about going through Basement 82 back in the day. My experience was that going through and dealing with my own addiction, dealing with the fact that I'm going to be Black in there for starters, because remember, I'm always judged on my skin, my appearance, and then feeling isolated. Then you got to go through the 7 days of hell and high water to get that stuff out of you. You're also very vulnerable. I was blessed to have an Indian girl with me. So we went through it together, and then she went her way, and I was lucky to go to a place called Palm Court.
On top of that, Roxy, can you also explain how AOD services can promote inclusivity for women with trans experiences and sister girls?
That's a tough act to follow. Your story.
It always is. It always is.
So I'm going to come at this from a slightly different perspective, from the staff perspective. There's a lot of trans and gender diverse people who end up being clients or participants of AOD services because of things that have happened to them in the past. I've been working for the Buttery now for about 7 years, I think. It took me 3 years to work out that it took me 2 years to settle down and realize that I was trans and start transitioning. But then I realized that I too had been misusing alcohol in the past as well, to try and hide myself. I was functioning, so I managed to hide it. But then I further realized that I had been misusing food, and I'm still trying to get on top of that. So I actually have a food addiction of sorts, undiagnosed, but I'm still trying to work my way through that. So yeah, a lot of us have been through a lot, and it's really important, like Rusty was saying, just talk, sit, ask questions, sit, listen, and let us tell our story. And often it's just being able to tell the story that allows you to release some of that trauma and settle down. I was very lucky I've actually worked for a bunch of places where I could have equally come out and been equally accepted as I was at the Buttery. Unlike a lot of other people, I know people have been sacked because they were trans, which is just in this day and age, just an appalling attitude. Yeah, I actually had a dream run with the buttery, so it's probably not the best example. Well, no, this is the thing to aim for. If a trans staff member comes to you and says that, yes, I'm trans, I'd like to transition, do what the buttery did, which was go, okay, what can we do? And literally, I had one person misunderstand when I said that it was someone whose first language wasn't English. I said that I was changing my gender, and that person thought that I was changing my agenda. And I found that out when they said, I didn't realize you had one to start with. Of course, but we got through that. Yeah, it's really important just to sit and listen. We all have different stories to tell, and something I was thinking of earlier about words and language, the words and language that we use to describe ourselves, were mostly given to us by other people. And a lot of the time we try and explain ourselves using words that aren't ours to start with. So that's often a lot of the problem. So sometimes it's not a yes, no question. It's not what's your sexuality or what's your gender. It's like, I haven't been able to explain my gender or sexuality in less than kind of 50 words each. There's no words that really describe me. And that builds more pressure as well when you need to try and justify yourself to understand which box to tick on a form, or yeah. But I think we're getting there. There's a lot of changes being made and improvements being made, just not equally across the board.
I think personally, one of the biggest changes that I think need to be able to happen, your processing systems being inclusive of trans language. I think so many times in my life, and like I've interned at big banks and corporations, and a lot of the time I get told that they can't change their language for a lot of their formulas because it's too hard and it's a really big system and like all of this really ridiculous stuff. And so maybe like going back to your services, to your organizations, and like really grilling whoever is in charge of that system to make sure that you're not having to box yourself into places that don't really align with you. Even like my current banking system, still having to have my birth name on it and all these other things, like it's so silly. So I think that's a takeaway from me, is going back and really grilling your systems and your operations to make sure that they are inclusive, if not just for the services, but for yourselves as well. I think often we can be so drawn to helping other people that we often overlook when we don't feel supported in an organization. And I think that's really important as well. I'm going to pass it over to Nate to ask what some of the benefits of AOD services being inclusive of trans women with. My brain thought of that question differently than it came out. What are some of the benefits of AOD services being inclusive of women with trans experience, sister girls, and trans people in general?
I think the biggest benefit is that you won't be actively practicing discrimination. That's a joke. I would like to jump on the point you were just making, is that the system thing is a big deal. I work at the hospital and it's a disastrously out-of-date system that we use, and it creates situations for, I like to hope, unintentional transphobia, but often that can escalate into actual transphobia. And when we have systems that are set up to fail the most marginalized and vulnerable people, that's when harm occurs. The changes need to be made by people advocating for us, because I kick and scream a lot, and I've been kicking and screaming for 1.5 years at my role, and the systems still haven't changed or budged, and they need to, because if it says a big thing on here and then it says something different on the sheet, and then there's the clinician, whoever it is, there's room for error, right? And that's, you're not being given the right tools to make the best calls to support the people you're working with. That has to change before anything else does. Because until that does, There's going to be mistakes, there's going to be slip-ups, regardless of how intentional or lateral that discrimination is. We need to create systems that honor people's identities and prioritize, because that prioritizes recovery. Because often someone's gender, sexuality, that is a protective factor. That's a positive that they have. You know, there is these stereotypes that exist that like trans people are messed up, it's a mental health thing, you know, it's still in the DSM, all those, you know, things, we're still unlearning those things. And we have to disassemble them together. Yeah, it's complicated, but I think if you can see trans people outside of their transness as well, there's this fine line between acknowledging it, validating it, and also not making a gigantic deal about it. Just treat them like a person, look them in the eye, use their name, treat them like a person would be my biggest takeaway. Yeah, we all have the skills to do that, and we do it with all types of other people. It's just about using those skills and practicing them with trans people. Benefits. Yeah, I think the benefit of creating more inclusive services is that people from marginalized groups, like trans people of color who are experiencing, you know, substance abuse stuff, will actually access help instead of not engaging in help. The difference in my recovery was directly related to being respected. I was presenting to hospital. Let's just say I was a frequent flyer to hospital. They knew my name, my dead name. And I was popping in for an OD or a PEC visit or a, you know, every couple of weeks. And the difference between the recovery sticking and me relapsing was the clinicians, the team, the doctors, everyone across the board acknowledging and respecting and validating my experiences in that moment. Because in that moment, I didn't look as the way I do now. I was overdosing. I was like, I probably didn't pass, I guess, right? And that's the part that's tricky. You need to validate those experiences when they're emerging. And the fact that I was respected in those moments and linked in with the right services, not just alcohol and other drugs, but, you know, trans support services, that helped me navigate recovery in an actual way that could be defined as more successful. That's the key factor.
The next question is possibly one that the people in the room struggle with a lot, and it's around the idea of making a mistake when addressing us or referring to us, who are trans people, trans feminine people, trans people in general. I feel like most of you could possibly agree that it's crossed your mind that you don't want to make a mistake, right? Because no one really knows what that process looks like at the end of that. If a service provider does make a mistake though, how would you like to see that corrected? And I'm going to get all of you to answer this one because I think it's really important for everyone's perspective. I'm going to start with you, Rusty.
Oh. So if you do happen to make a mistake, God forbid, we're all entitled to make a mistake. Laugh it off, apologise. You know, a lot of us are mature enough to understand that, Jesus Christ, we know we're entitled to have a slip up. It's when you start with me, if you start throwing those apologies at me, I'll turn around until you get stuffed. A mistake is a mistake. I don't need you to harp on because quite frankly, it becomes annoying. But to me, say you're going to slip up. I'm mature enough and I've lived life long enough and I'm comfortable within my own skin to know that I don't have to throw myself up and down the street there and point the fingers and carry on like, you know, like a bag of shit. You're entitled to your mistake. We all make mistakes, you know, in everyday lives. But we're all adults enough to say, well, I'm sorry, I slipped up, or I'm sorry. Does that hurt? But like I said, I can roll with silly mistakes, but I cannot roll with this constant rehashment of that mistake because it becomes so boring. I own it, I accept it, but then you're dealing with me. That's the difference with a lot of girls out.
I think that sometimes when we get the continued apology, that sometimes they don't actually mean it. They're just trying to cover that so that we don't get upset about it. I too just like the quick apology and move on. Just, oh, sorry. And that's it. We all make mistakes. Some of, we like to think that our brains are like supercomputers. They're not. We forget other people's names and we use the wrong pronouns accidentally, sometimes even for cis people, between cis people. So yeah, just apologize and move on. The constant reminder of who we used to, or constant reminder of who people used to think that we were, that's the thing that we'd like to get past. The hotel that I stayed in last night, when I checked out this morning, I got referred to as sir, and I started transitioning about 6 years ago, so it doesn't worry me so much, but I just corrected them and said ma'am, and the reaction to the ma'am was there was a frown and a stop and a think, and I don't understand. Some people, are they not watching television? Are they not listening to the radio? It's not as simple as it used to be. People, yeah, it was the way they had to stop and think about it. And the frown was a question. Are you sure? Are you sure you're who you think you are? Yeah, that was the upsetting bit for me.
I'm gonna let you know a secret. I sometimes make mistakes on people's pronouns, and I'm a trans person. We exist.
I sometimes misgender myself.
Contrary to belief, the transness is just a part of who we are. It's not this all-encompassing thing. Like maybe it was at one point. It definitely was for me. If you make a mistake, that's fine. I do too. My friends are changing their pronouns all the time. Sometimes it's annoying, but it's fine. We're learning, growing, language changes. Just roll with it. If you make a mistake, yeah. And also just like do some learning. Say your pronouns first. That's the best thing you can do. Be vulnerable. You have, as a service provider, you have all the power in that interaction, right? This person is vulnerable. They're seeking help. It's a power dynamic. You're in charge. Give a little. Like, hey, I know this is really hard. You're like, it's great you're here. My pronouns are this. What are yours? Oh, there's 2 names here on your file. Which one do you like? Like, you already have the skills and tools to do that. I do it all the time with people who aren't trans. Sometimes, in a hospital setting, there'll be a patient and they'll have a name that I absolutely cannot pronounce and will not try because I'm just like, well, I don't ever make a mistake because I'll die. So I do this crazy thing where I go up to the person and go, hey, my name's Nate Jamie. It's a bit weird. Some people mispronounce it sometimes. How do you say your name? And then they just tell me. Yeah. You can do that same skill with a transgender person. I believe in all of you. You have the capacity to use that exact same technique. You can do it.
I think on that as well, while we encourage the idea of like brushing off mistakes, I think it also removes accountability from subconscious bias, right? Like, and I think that if you are making mistakes and you notice that you make the same mistake with several people, I think it's really important to acknowledge why you're making that mistake. Are you making that mistake because you think they should look a certain way as a trans person? Are you making a mistake because you struggle to use they, them pronouns? I think that's really important. Like, while of course, don't let us carry and like turn this around to make you the victim, because that's not our responsibility to make you feel like make us feel sorry for you for messing up. What I think the important thing to take away is like brush it off for us. So, because we have enough to carry, right? We don't have to carry every interaction we have with every person in our day, but you have the responsibility to go back and assess why you made that mistake. Let that sit with you. Work out if it's because you think people look a certain way and should look a certain way. Work out where the core of that is. And that's what you need to work on. Like Nate said, like learning and, you know, like if you need to sometimes take a course, so come to things like this is really important. And it kind of minimizes that mistake, but also makes sure that you're becoming a better person, not just being like, I made a mistake, whoops. And then you're continuing that pattern, because that's when it becomes dangerous. I think on the joke of the agenda that you made earlier, Roxy, it's like the only agenda I have is keeping trans people alive. And if accessing these spaces and educating you all on these types of things is going to do that, then absolutely I have an agenda as a trans person. I think on to the next question. Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
I guess the other thing I see a lot is sometimes in a service setting, people have the capacity to magically respect someone's gender, pronouns, whatever, in person, face to face. And then they'll go into the nurse's station or do a handover or this other setting where the individual is no longer present. And you know, this magical thing happens, they forget and they stop gendering them correctly. And that's called lateral transphobia. And that's when you guys, you got to do it the whole time, not just when we're there. And the thing is, a lot of people at my work don't know I'm trans. And I get to go out with the patients and in the nurse's station. And I'm like, oh, you're the worst. You're the actual worst person that may exist on the earth. We can see it, we can hear it. The thing about trans people, trans women especially, I don't know if you've heard of street violence, but it's the thing that happens where you get beat up for looking the way you are. I personally don't like going down King Street in Newtown because that's a place where that's happened to me a lot. Yeah, we can tell when you're anxious or unsure or scared. It's kind of that superpower because we've had to read people really well our whole lives to keep ourselves safe. So working on that authenticity with your intention is key, and practicing it the whole time, not just for show, because we can also tell that because we have super hearing.
Like we gain an extra sense when we affirm ourselves.
Hypervigilance.
We can tell when you gender the dogs more correctly than you gender
Don't
us.
fucking do that, honestly. Oh, I misgendered your dog. Honestly, I'll kick it.
Rusty, what does peer support mean to you in the AOD service space, and why is it important?
Without sounding tacky, if you haven't walked the walk, you don't know the talk. How am I going to relate to you? Who's the one that's lived the life as a junkie? So you may have the doctor signs, you might have the stethoscopes. All I ask is that you listen to us. Don't come in there and think that you know everything, because till you've stood in my heels and endured what I've had to endure, I don't want to hear you. I love you, I value you, and I enjoy your support. But please do not think that you can talk to me and know about me, my body, and my health issues. And I'm just one. There's others of my sisters here too. We all have our own different ways, and the brothers. have their own different ways and their own different issues. Yes, we might come in that one same egg cup, but every one of us little eggs in there, we think and feel differently. Also too, it's you can give us all the attention, you can give us all the every moral emotional support that you can. But there are times when girls like myself, when we're out working and we're still feeding our addiction, things do happen to us. But I can't tell you because it hasn't happened to you. But I've got a sister that's happened to. So I've got her to lean on. And the other ones that come, you know, we're there for each other. It's just that when we get outside of those zones and coming into your guys' space, always ask for us, you know, ask us, Rusty, how you going? Is there anything else in your general issues concerning, you know, your withdrawal and detoxing from toxins? Anything. Just so you can engage them, get them thinking that, you know, I'm here, I'm okay, I feel safe because they're actually talking to me. They're not talking to me as the junkie, they're not talking to me as a trans hooker. They're talking to me as the person here that's trying to get myself over and done with things that I've done to my own body. And that's addiction. And also as for lateral violence, back in the 80s, we used to have sisters that used to ring our employees and tell them that, how come you've got men in there in dresses working for you? This is how bad it was for lateral violence for us. And then as for preconception, pre-IDs or preconception ideas about what a trans woman was. Back in the 80s, we used to have to deal with a lot of violent police. The vice squad used to be the worst. They'd roll us all up against the walls, and all they ever did was look at your feet and then your hands. If they didn't come across to what they considered was a female's hands, well, you got thrown in the bull wagon and you got tormented all night. So having small hands and small feet saved my neck from a lot of hairy situations. That's the only time I'll acknowledge them and their silliness about what a trans woman's hands look like. That's it.
Nave, same question. What does peer support mean to you in the AOD service space and why is it important?
So I'm lucky enough to have had a lived experience of peer support, receiving peer support, and now being a peer support worker. So it was a key part of my recovery. I doubt it was, again, the other factor in it sticking, which, by the way, 2,000 days the other day. No biggie, it's only 5.5 years. Yeah, like it helps tangibly model a way out because, yeah, there's a lot of stereotypes. And I met a trans woman who got sober. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize we're allowed to do that. I thought we had to be fucked up and mentally ill. And now I can still be those things. I'm very complicated. But like it gave me the tools to be like, oh, I can go. It doesn't have to be like right now. This will pass, this will end. And we didn't have like that much else in common. But it was just like they looked similar. They had the same gripes with the system. They knew what discrimination felt like. We dished together. Sometimes you just need to hash it out with someone who looks like you or has been through something like you. And that's a good starting point. Because in that situation, there's no power dynamic. We're equals. We're just two people who've been through stuff. That's a good place to start with recovery. And yeah, and now I get to do that in my role. And it's so nice. Like I walk in there with my little lanyard with all the silly badges on it, and my pronouns and my flags, and there'll be this kid in ED who like has rainbow colored hair and they just see me and they're just like, oh, thank God. their shoulders drop and they go, I cannot actually tell you why I'm actually here because I don't want to tell my parents this. It's like, yeah, babe. It helps. I can't stress it enough. Higher lived experience, higher diversity. It saves you money and also it works. I don't know how to stress it in a more capitalist way. You look cooler and it saves money.
Nave, I've enjoyed listening to you so much talk about your experiences with this space, and I think everyone has benefited so much. But I think on a lot of the time people view us and our journey, and it's kind of always shrouded in this like doom and gloom and like destruction and sadness and like hate and anger. And it's like, sure, some of those things exist because I'm human, not because I'm trans, but like, what are some of the joys you've experienced in being AOD, in experiencing the recovery of AOD?
It's my favorite question because it's yeah, contrary to belief and stereotype, trans women do enjoy things and have fun and yeah, like to smile and not just like basket case. I mean, we can be, but like we can also not be. And I think that's a really important takeaway. The things that I've got is like my freedom. I know my baseline. I know who I am. And that's still like a lot. But before it was really hard to even know what that was, what my baseline was, who I was. How can you even know your identity or all these things if you're high all the fucking time? Like you can't. So I authentically like know those things now, and that gives me the strength to go forward. And that's been really hard earned. And I think you can't stress the value of knowing yourself, knowing your authentic self. And that is the true joy and freedom that comes with all recovery, but especially in my experience, the intersections of transness and recovery. Do you guys have any joys or positives? That
Yeah, I want to hear your joys.
Oh, also my skin's great now. I looked a lot older, like 5 or 6 years ago. So like getting sober and like you get hotter. People don't talk about that. And if you can say that to a trans or queer person, they will listen. Yeah, it's like pitch it. Like you're trying to sell recovery, right? You get to know yourself better, you sleep better, and your skin gets clearer.
The skin thing is true.
It's true, right?
Yeah. Although one of the downsides though is if you're still having facial hair removed, the soft skin thing is a bad combination. I can only use a blade razor about once a week. Otherwise my skin gets ripped to shreds. I'm still getting used to the joy thing. I'm only really a couple of years post the, let's call it the busy period. But I can see a lot of joy in front of me, which is when you're watching other people live a joyful life and you've got to work so hard to get to that point, it can be a bit frustrating. Actually, just one thing I wanted to say is all being adults, we've all experienced trauma to get to here in some way. So we've experienced a different trauma. And so a lot of the time it's just a matter of sitting down and talking to people and conversing about communing about your trauma. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the joy. Tell me about the joy later over lunch.
There's so many joys. Honestly.
For myself personally now, I'm at the best side of my life. Growing up in the Northwest like I did when I was young, I also come from a tribal language and cultural background. So Australia needs to acknowledge that I am also cold, cultural and language diverse. So growing up in that background and coming from that strong history, in my teens and when I was in my 20s before I came here, I went from being what the hell is wrong with this kid to what we would call either as a jija or a kajari. In our language, that means sister girl. So now at my stage, I've gone from that to an aunt. And I always tell people that I do not belong to myself. I belong to a big, big tribe. And part of me and my journey and my age where I am now, I've gone to the stage where now I've become somebody here. I didn't want it, but my people give me that right. So nowadays I am what they call a gamayura. In Aranda, that means old girl. The other one was Gande. Gande and Yindabani means granite. So that's a stage of me within my own life, from my peoples, from my trans adventures in history that has now taken me through. But again, you got to remember, I'm one. There are girls out here that still got their journeys to go through, but I'm starting to get to mine now. And I count myself to be lucky.
I think everyone here is lucky to be able to listen to your story and listen to you kind of let them into this really beautiful aspect of your life as a cultural person, as a Yamatji woman. I'm on to the last question. I know that none of you want us to leave, but we do have one left. If the audience takes away exactly what you'd like for them to take away from this session, what would you like to see happening differently in the AOD support space? I'll start with you, Nate. Okay.
More color coordination. Different list. Sorry. I guess I want to drive home like a little couple of like little sayings, like people are who they say they are. Like full stop, no, nothing else. And if you're not sure, just ask. You can make eye contact with us, it's okay. It's all right. We'll look back. Hire and employ more lived experience people, please. People need to see people who look like them. They don't need to be told what to do. They just need to be shown that there's a way through. I don't know if you've met people, but they're pretty reactionary. They don't like, you know, with, not for, I think is a good takeaway. Just affirm them that they're not alone in their experience and that them in this vulnerable moment of accessing the service, they've done a good thing. I'm so glad you're here. Like you can do a lot in that initial moment where you've acknowledged how impossible coming through the door is or answering the call, whatever it is. Because that's the hardest part. If you all have anxiety disorders, right? Like it's hard to do anything. But then when you've got these other intersections, it's harder. I guess starting from a point of understanding and then validating, that's the P work bit. Acknowledging that the intersections of transness, queerness, mental health, addiction are complicated. And by honoring the individual situation, you can actually begin from that moment to offer meaningful support. I think that's a takeaway. And color coordinate.
Roxy?
Three things. The first one is how surprised I am that I won't be beeped in this video. I really thought that I would have said one of the words that need to be beeped out. Two, language. The language that you use to talk to people is not finite. It's the tool that we use to converse with people, to understand them. The words don't mean the exact specific thing all of the time. So even though someone might use a word to you, they might have a slightly different meaning to it. So it's a matter of keep on talking to them to try and work out the meaning that they're trying to get across. And the third thing is help us share the emotional load. A lot of us have been triggered so many times by experiences that it can shock you over and over and over again. It can be easy to slip back into to shock and trauma, like the experience I had with the checking out. And something else that happened the other day, I had to sign up for a service that the service was trying to do the best that they could in terms of a list of gender to choose from, but they didn't know who to talk to. So the list of genders were male, female, transgender MTF and transgender FTM. And
Don't do that.
don't do that.
You don't need to know anyone's genitals, okay?
Well, in this case, this was something that was interacting with the police, and their systems were going to need to interact. So they actually, in this case, they did need to know the gender, but it was such a bad way of going about it that they actually didn't approach someone to talk to about what would be good to put in there. Acon's list of genders is a really good one if you need to come up with a list. I like theirs. Male, female, differently identify, and non-binary. Yep, that's my three things.
My three things, well, the first one would be that as you guys are going to be dealing with us from front of house, how you engage with me will also make me think about whether I should go further with this, or shall I try to get myself out that door and run? Number two, and I think this is something that you guys do, because you're all the time dealing with shattered people. There are times when I was going through it, there were some times that, when I was going through the medical procedure and all that, I was scared. There I am, if I didn't pull my finger out, I probably would have been dead by now, but getting to that stage and then coming through and talking to those at the front of house and stuff like that, I was actually afraid because I did not know what I was going to be walking into. Dealing with that and then thinking about, are they going to treat me okay? So that's where another fear, and then the fear is that, if I'm not going to get treated, well, why should I be here? And I know it's going to sound a little bit silly and very perverse, but where did I write it down here? Another thing too, service providers as well as other people, others that are working in the health sectors need to remember we're not just sexual fantasies.
I think we laugh, and I also laughed at that comment, but I think when you are fully able to see trans people for themselves and you understand where we're at, that sounds like a really funny thing to think. But literally the other day I got in a cab and my cab driver felt that because I looked like a trans person and I had nails on, he had the right to ask me about how big my genitals were. So like, while that question can be funny, this happens to us every single day. Hate cabs, I hate Ubers, I hate any time that I'm having to interact with a person in a confined space like that. So like, while what Rusty is saying sounds so silly and like decades ago, it's still happening to us all the time. And that's a big takeaway that I want as well, is maybe you don't realize that you might be doing that and you might be slightly sexualizing our experiences, but it's like some of us are just like real plain, real boring. Some of us are really exciting. Like we're so diverse of a peoples, and it really speaks to person-centered care. It speaks to meeting us where we're at, and it speaks to being with us rather than against us. That's the end of our panel. I hope you've all had a really great day. I think some of us will be sticking around through lunchtime if you have any other questions. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your, is it a symposium? Networking? Forum. Have a great day, guys. Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause to my.
I used to manage a women's service for quite some years, and I can say unequivocally and confidently that trans women and women with trans experiences accessed my service, and they accessed it quite seamlessly. It was a whole of staff and culture approach. And when they came in and said they were women and they were trans women, what we did was we treated them like women. They assimilated with the community. They were fine. Everybody in the community, the other residents there, it was not a thing as long as the staff led it and role modeled that stuff. So it's really important that it comes from the top down, and even more so that in organizations that it comes from a policy and a strategic level. So that stuff is, it's kind of a bottom down approach that we need to take on board, and it works. And I've seen it work. And I've done that work with some people here in this room today, which I feel quite proud about. So work with them where they're at. It's not hard. What I thought that we would do for the next half an hour to make everybody work for their food again, I know, is talk about reflections and the evaluations we'll do later, Alice, I promise. I want to ask some questions to you all and have you all work at your tables and talk to each other and talk about what today meant for you, and start those discussions and start stumbling through that language and trying that language. It's not going to be perfect the first time. I also want you all to know that now you know, you're in the know, so you have a responsibility to this knowledge, especially in your work with clients. So our first question: what two things, or as many things, or as little things, does your organization do well in terms of being inclusive for gender and or sexuality diverse people? I'm talking about what's currently in place. What are some examples that you can draw on right now that's there? And if it's nothing, then it's nothing. That's okay. So amongst yourselves, there's butcher's papers and markers, and then we're going to roam the mic. So please nominate a speaker at your table. All right, everybody, if I could just call you back, please. There's always that one table with the giggles. I hope you had good discussions amongst yourselves and nominated a speaker. I know that was a hot topic at some of the tables. Does anybody want to go first? Any table want to go first and respond what two things? Okay, Lim, you're up. I'm not even going to finish the question.
So, hi, my name's Lim and I work for the St. Vincent's Health Network. So I am the team leader for the Safe Haven crew, and some of our team are here. And I feel like as a team, we're quite on board in terms of gender diversity and making sure that we're, respecting people's spaces and respecting people's identity. But I feel like as a whole, St. Vincent's could do better. I'll bring in an example was when we had to have mandatory saliva tests, like as a routine test for, when we went into the second lockdown. And there were only two genders. There was only two options, male, female, and that was it. And obviously, you're right, you raise that with people, but it doesn't, as you said earlier, it definitely is a bottom up sort of, change that needs to happen. And it is a huge culture change that needs to shift. Even myself, I'll just share a funny story. I didn't realize that a cis man was somebody who was born with their gender as, the gender that they were born with is what they identify with. I actually thought a cis man was somebody who was feminine because cis for sissy. And so they've actually a month ago, it was only about a month ago, corrected me on that one. And then now I understand the whole, idea of cis male, cis woman, and it's not as confusing for me. But and I'm a cis man, yes, a proud cis man. Proud queer cis man, should I say. But no, on an organisational level, I really do think St. Vincent's can improve a lot. But I think in terms of our team, we've done pretty well. And we do see quite a large proportion of gender diverse people within our service. Yeah, that's the question.
Thanks, Lim. I love an answer and a story at the same time. I think it just adds that a little bit more. Who's next? All right. The people
Sorry, we
online.
need the mic for the people online to hear.
Sorry. Embrace it. It's your moment.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I work for St Vincent de Paul in the CCCP Continuing and Coordinated Care Program for Drug and Alcohol. We have the welcome here stickers with the rainbow flag, the sexuality and gender specific questions on intake. We also ask our PWA if they would rather a preference on male or female to work with. Referral forms are pronouns inclusive with Mission Australia. Signatures on emails with pronouns we use, and promotion of diversity in employment opportunities.
Thanks, Rach. That's a good list. Who's next? Oh, I was staring at somebody, but yes, go ahead.
Please feel free.
I'll stare at you next. Don't worry.
Hi, I'm Sarah from St Vincent's Drug and Alcohol, but I worked with Rob on our list of two good things, and Rob's obviously from NADA. So both NADA and St Vincent's belong to the Pride in Health network. And part of that means that we participate in the HWEI audit tool, which can really be beneficial for looking at ways in which you can improve the service. And I recognise St Vincent's has obviously got a way to go, but it's a really good starting spot, I think. Other things we do well, NADA use the pronouns on their badges and everything, which is fantastic. They also record their workforce profile. And I just wanted to highlight something that I was really impressed with when I came to St Vincent's from Islid, which was seeing on the intranet, they had pictures of their staff from the community who you could go to if there were any internal kind of issues that you wanted to raise with those people, which I thought was really helpful. So that's it from me.
Thanks, Sarah. And I think everybody's on a journey, and this isn't meant to be a shaming exercise for your organization, but it's kind of a reality check. And the next question we're going to talk about, well, what can we do next? And what next? And who's going to be next now? Next table. I don't know who it's going to be. Oh, God, that's 2 times in a row, Lexi, you dodged it.
Hi, we're from a small table of, well, it was just 2. So I guess, so I'm Chris. I'm a cisgendered gay male. And I think part of one of the good things that we do in our department in St Vincent's is that we have a lot of LGBTQI staff, which I think is really helpful. And I think growing our peer support worker staff will be amazing too. And the other thing that I thought was really good was that we were allowed to come today and actively encouraged to. And there's a lot of staff from St Vincent's here, and I think that's really good as well. So thank you for today.
Thanks, Chris. There's a lot of St. Vincent's Hospital staff here today, so that's a shout out to you all. The other thing that I think is really good, Chris, now I'm going to out you, that Chris is a doctor. So seeing all different disciplines, nurses here, allied health, peer workers, management, having a good representation across your organization is amazing and fantastic. And thanks so much for coming, Chris. Who's going to get the eyes? Oh, Alexa, it's you.
So we have, I'm Kelly, she, they. I work for Who's New Beginnings, which is a women's residential rehab service. And also, where do you work again? Guthrie House and Leslie. Matilda Centre. So the Matilda Centre has the transgender flag and the non-binary flags throughout their service. And what was yours? Oh, was it? I swear that was your one. The flags, swap it, sorry. And also taking the titles out of form, so no Mr. or Mrs. Who's does a lot of different things, but I think what we do well is our work system does have options on intake like non-binary, transgender. We do LGBTQIA meetings weekly. We have a LGBT lunch, thanks to Sarah starting that off. I think it was you that started it, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yep. All right. Just double checking. Sorry. We also ask what support they need or want. Yeah, but there could be some more things that we could do, but we do refer external LGBTQIA services as well. For instance, if they want their own counsellor or doctor or anything like that. So yeah, but yeah, we could do better.
Thanks, Kelly. You must have had some good management over at Who's New Beginnings at some point. And my lucky last. Who got it?
Right, the anxiety. Oh, you want to do it? No, you.
Okay. My name is Nicole. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the program manager at Jarrah House, and I'm incredibly pleased to speak on the microphone.
You're doing great.
Where I speak to people all day for a living in front of people, and yeah, here we are. So the one thing we are doing well at Jarrah House is that we're asking for help. We haven't been doing well for a long time, and I think we've had a big organisational restructure, and before that there was a lot of apathy when people didn't know something or felt nervous about something. So we are here. We're here and we're open. We're asking for help, and I think that's what we're doing well. Anyone else want to?
Thanks so much for sharing that. I think that's a really good point, and that's where you start, and you can't start anywhere else. So that's fantastic, and please let anybody in this room know if you need any support. The network, NADA, we're all here to support you 100%. Did you want to come up and do the second question, Hannah? I'll pass you over to Hannah, and I'll be back.
So the next question would be really great for you all to chat about as a table is, so what activity or intervention can you introduce in your organisation to improve inclusivity for gender and or sexuality diverse people? So we're going to hand it back over to you. And if you just wanted to chat amongst yourselves and write some stuff down, and then if you could allocate someone as well to say what the answer is, that would be great. Okay, everyone, I'm sorry we didn't have as much time to chat about that question, but we're just going to quickly go round and see what people's answers are. Who would like to go first?
I'm sorry, I told Alexa she had to go first. Sorry, Rob. Rob's my boss. Everybody say sorry.
Oh gosh. Hello, everybody. My name is Alexa. I work at Who's New Beginnings. And this is a combination of things to improve on with Who's New Beginnings, Guthrie House and the Matilda Centre. So the first thing, I guess, for Who's New Beginnings, it's putting pronouns on staff emails, especially when we've got emails going out to, other services. Occasionally they go out to people for intake. So I think we need to start doing that. And pronouns for our residents and some of the groups. So we have a morning group each day where the community gets together and talks about the daily issues. And at the end, they have a positive affirmation or a just for the day. So including that, so it could look like, Alexa, she, her, just for today, I'll remain positive. That might be a great way to start a bit more inclusivity. More diverse flags. So we have a couple of flags at the moment, but we are missing a couple. So we'd love to get those up and in the service. And then we've all thought that LGBTQIA training for all staff would be great. There's 3 of us here today, but I'd really love for all the team to come and do the training. I even think somehow it'd be great for residents to do some of this training in some format. I'm not sure how that would quite work, but I think that would be great to be able to get that into group work on a regular basis. And gender neutral bathroom signs. At New Beginnings, we don't have any signs. We're, identified as a women's service, but for the Matilda Centre or other places like that, gender neutral signage would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll hand it to Rob now.
Thank you. So Sarah at St. Vincent's talked about that they're going to celebrate special days for community to ensure that there's visibility within the service and that they have a float at Mardi Gras and that it's important for this to be about being fun and joyful and celebrating our communities. And from NADA, it was about hearing from our members about what they need so we can do better to support our members to do better. It was about continuing to advocate, for things around the national data sets. We've built gender and sexuality items into NADA base, but we'll continue to fight for government to include it in the national drug and alcohol data set. And Sarah also mentioned about who to talk to. Do people know who to talk to at NADA if they want to talk about improving responses? So we could do better at communicating to our members who to come and talk to. And if a NADA staff member can't support a member, to direct them to people within the community that can support members to do better. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Rob. Who would like to go next? Great.
Got a new job, everybody.
Michael.
Thank you. My name is Michael. I am a cis male gay man. My pronouns are he, him. So I work for Mission Australia, our Southwest Sydney services. So recently we've developed a Pride and Diversity reference group and currently working on promoting our lunchtime learnings. So once a month we will be sending out a pre-recorded webinar and each month will be a different, I guess, topic. First topic was pronouns and how to use them correctly. And yeah, we're planning on to do one every month. And also recently was our first Ida Hobbit celebration that was promoted through the company. So, all across Australia, we had teams taking part in that and promoting that on our social media so that we could get more people involved and have more representation. Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
Hi there, I'm Olivia. I'm a social worker at St. Vincent's Hospital and I work in the drug and alcohol service and my pronouns are she, her. So this was a collaboration between the ADS and, between different ADS services. So we also said to have pronouns on email signatures, on IDs, and also to have a more inclusive and better electronic database, because at the moment it's not very inclusive or respectful. To include questions about gender in assessments for the ADIS service, to be practicing our pronouns when introducing ourselves, and to have mandatory training for gender and sexuality. All right.
That's so awesome. Thank you. This table. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Amanda. I'm from Jarrow House as well. I don't like the microphone either. Thanks, Nicole. My pronouns are she and her. So we thought start small with changing the email signatures with our pronouns and adding the flags. Definitely in-house education for all the staff. So there's 3 of us from Jarrow here today, but we need to educate the whole of the staff. Regarding our intake assessments, changing the language completely about how we ask these questions and adding posters and signages to all the clinics. And I love whose idea about the group for the clients. I think we might steal that one. That sounds like that's an awesome idea. And also love the idea of a special days to celebrate gender diversity within our residential clients. So, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And we'll go to the last table.
Hey guys, I'm Mike from Vinnie's Triple CP. I identify as a cis gay male with he and him. So some of the things that we could do to improve our service is we currently only have binary bathrooms. So we could move towards a gender neutral bathrooms. Also conducting an LGBTIQ smart group. We currently only run a regular smart group, whereas we could go with bit more culturally specific. As others have mentioned, around pronouns on business cards and name tags, ongoing training and education. With Vinnie's being a NGO and a religious-based organisation, there's the need for a higher level of proactive engagement with community to restore relationships with the LGBTI community. And also extra funding for peer support within the organisation. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for those responses. I'll now hand it over to Sarah to close off.
We've made it, everybody. Well done. Just a few things. This is on everyone's table. It's also on the ACON's website. Jack, do you know where specifically this in TransHub, that fantastic website you were talking about before? It's language matters. It guides, but again, be led by the person that you're working with. Always check in that language is representative and reflective of their experiences. And we have some spares. I wanted to say thank you to the Gender and Sexuality Diversity Network and to NADA. That's kind of thinking myself, but we'll go with it, for putting this on. I think it was a really good opportunity for people to come together across the sector that come from different disciplines and different understandings and are on a different part of their journey and path around this stuff. And for everybody being open and honest and respectful, and particularly to the people that presented and to the panel members, I just want to give another round of applause. The other thing that I want to do more broadly, and I've been doing lately when I've been speaking, is saying thank you to everybody that works in the drug and alcohol sector at the moment. We're all aware of the workforce crisis and the vacancies and the additional labor that puts on everybody else, and we're all in it, and we're still in it. And we NADA are advocating very aggressively, is a new appetite for the board, to try and address this. But thank you to everybody, and well done. And we know it's hard. And if NADA can help, please always reach out.